Hi, everyone. I hope you can see the slides, and here we go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karine, sounds like jelly bean, and I'm speaking to you from my home office here in Highland Park, St. Paul. I've lived in this house for 17 years, and I'm a second-generation Filipino-American, and both of my parents are retired university professors. It's so wonderful to be with you here in this space that is both virtual and real, fractured and solidary, hopeful and connected. I'm so honored and pleased to be here in a collaboration with Professor Devavani Chatterjee, and we're both very grateful to the ACM, Charlie, Brian, and to the Siri Center for Scholarship and Teaching, directed by Joan Ostrov. Everyone here is supporting our endeavors. Our hope today with the workshop is to set the stage for the rest of the summer workshops, but specifically to name the contexts that we've been living in for some time now. Contexts of loss, grief, confusion, trauma, and uncertainty. A feeling that we're not competent for this job because it's changed so radically. And we want to give permission for you to consider holistic, tender, receptive, and soft ways to engage those contexts, especially when we begin teaching, although I understand that some of you are still teaching, so we're all on different schedules. But the point is to open with this kind of vocabulary, this kind of framework, and engage all of you together. We'll stop several times to let you collect your thoughts, to shine that light inward. And there will be time for small group discussion as well. And much more time on Friday, I understand. We'll be drawing from our scholarship and from our experience, and we invite you to join us. We hope that you'll get some practical tips, but more important, some chance to share with each other. If I may, I'd like to share some words of inspiration. And on the next slide, you'll see the first and last few stanzas of an epic poem. Well, it's not really epic, but you know, epic, the way young people use the word today to mean singular, fantastic, remarkable. The poem is A Map to the Next World by our US Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. Her poem is included in the book How We Became Human, New and Selected Poems from 1975 to 2001. And by the way, she's also a musician. You can find this poem on the Poetry Foundation website. In the last days of the fourth world, I wished to make a map for those who would climb through the hole in the sky. My only tools were the desires of humans as they emerged from the killing fields, from the bedrooms and the kitchens. For the soul is a wanderer with many hands and feet. The map must be of sand and can't be read by ordinary light. It must carry fire to the next tribal town for renewal of spirit. In the legend are instructions on the language of the land, how it was we forgot to acknowledge the gift as if we were not in it or of it. We were never perfect. Yet the journey we make together is perfect on this earth who was once a star and made the same mistakes as humans. We might make them again, she said. Crucial to finding the way is this: there is no beginning or end. You must make your own map.
Thank you, Karine, for those powerful words, for setting our context so beautifully and compassionately and precisely. And I echo your thanks to Brian and Charlie and folks at ACM and to Joan Ostrov and the Series Center at McAllister and all of the people that I am not naming and don't know to name who are making this possible. I am Devavani Chatterjee. I use she or they pronouns. I'm a professor of biology and public health at McAllister, and also love to spend time writing, being a parent to my 4 children, and teaching yoga. I'm speaking to you from my office at McAllister, and it is a place that was deeply familiar to me and has astonishingly become less familiar. And that is a metaphor, I think, in some ways for how we are feeling right now. You know, many of us chose this work and have given ourselves to it for a long time, some maybe longer than others, but nonetheless, we chose it as a place that we wish to make familiar. And we have given ourselves to that task, and then suddenly it is not so familiar anymore. And I think we are doing a powerful thing. We are gathering, we are collecting, and we are connecting to see how we can make this map. And so I'm really, really so honored and touched and grateful to be here with all of you today. All of you today. I think that's really important. So I'm going to say it again. All of you today. You have showed up. You have made this 200+ person collective happen. And you have showed up to think together about how to teach with care and hope. And these are some of the questions that you articulated in your registration email, in your registration, on your registration form. And I share them with you as evidence that, as evidence of care and evidence of connection and evidence of compassion that you are bringing into this space. I like rainbows, so these are organized in rainbow colors. My children pointed out that the colors are not symmetrical, which is true, but if you look at this slide, then you'll see that I've tried to group them into ways, into sort of bins of things that these questions are addressing. And I want to recognize at the outset that in this short session, we're not going to necessarily go through all these questions, but there are other workshops that are coming via ACM and other resources that abound to more granularly address some of these questions. And even in our follow-up session on Friday, we'll be able to talk about some of these in more detailed and disciplinary ways. But we will try to get at the heart of many of these in our work with you today. I also want to point out that the bulk of this list is taken up with questions that you have about how to take care of students. And that says something. That says something about how much of your teaching and mentoring brain is taken up with that task of wanting to be intentional for them. But we must also take care of each other. Those questions are smaller. You can see that they are a short band at the bottom of the list, but they are important nonetheless. And we will try to hold space for those as well.
So we're inviting you now to open the chat and register yourself in a way by saying your name, your preferred pronouns, and one word that describes that what you are bringing with you today. And as you enter the chat, we'll also be talking with you about the very urgent context that we are dealing with today. So go ahead and go into the chat and share something about yourself there. The two contexts of which we speak are not separate, although some people are experiencing them as separate, as one more urgent than the other. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was brutally killed by a white police officer on this street corner in South Minneapolis. His death has unleashed a worldwide fury and sadness. I made this image last weekend when I visited the George Floyd Memorial, an impromptu and everyday growing memorial. And I visited with two young friends, one Black, one Chinese, who after so many weeks of quarantine were actually surprised to be outside. They were surprised to feel the sun on their skin. They were surprised to be in a public place. And most importantly, they were surprised to be feeling safe among strangers. All in all, it was an incredibly healing moment.
There is this other context. We are living many global pandemics, but this is the coronavirus pandemic. This image may be familiar to many of you from the Johns Hopkins University COVID-19 dashboard, and it is constantly out of date because this pandemic is shifting shape, shifting size, and our understanding,
in the way at all, honey.
biological, sociological, political, our understanding of all of these implications of the pandemic is also shifting all the time. But you know some of the facts and figures, the case total, which is on the slide and already out of date, the dangers, the biological dangers that have brought us to really rethink everything we do, right? The fact that it's a very contagious virus. There is no vaccine yet. We don't know what it does to different kinds of bodies. We don't understand why it affects bodies of all ages. We know that not everyone shows symptoms, but they can spread the virus. And all of these are pieces of the anxiety that we feel, perhaps the fear that we feel, and the preparation that we must do, the preparation we must undertake. I wanted to share an image of the virus with you, though. This comes to us from Alyssa Eckert at the CDC. And the CDC has a practice of taking pathogens that are of immediate threat and they intentionally articulate this, making a beautiful and memorable image so that people will start to recognize the coronavirus and start to pay attention. And you will see that Alyssa Eckert's image that she created with two other colleagues at the CDC is instantly recognizable now. My preschoolers recognize this as the coronavirus, right? They know when I'm reading something about the coronavirus. And there is an element of teaching in this because the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, is one of the places we look to for information and guidance as we navigate this landscape. And they are reminding us in this that teaching is an aesthetic act in the grimmest of realities, right? That we pay attention to how we bring everyone into information and shared learning. And that is an important part of what we do. I often think of these words from Bell Hooks. It is imperative that we teachers maintain hope even when the harshness of reality suggests otherwise. And many of you asked about that. How do we stay hopeful? How do we help our students stay hopeful? And it is something for us to be thinking about. So in this moment, I'm going to pause with this image, photograph taken by my daughter actually, and invite us into just a moment or so of private reflection. You can free write or just sit quietly, maybe close your eyes, maybe look at this image, and just notice what we have spoken of so far, these urgent contexts. What has this stirred up? How are you doing? how do these contexts, affect you? So one of the ways in which we have been thinking about this map making, this way of charting a path forward, is to think of these three imperatives of pedagogy, technology, and care. These are not new. These have been with us always. We are teachers, educators, learners. Pedagogy is something we think about all the time. Technology. I think we're all at a Zoom meeting, you know? Technology is ever present in our lives. We probably, all spend some amount of day on our phones, and we probably have used technology specifically to teach in some form or another already. And yet both of these landscapes feel shifted now, right? Because we have to think about pedagogy in different formats than we are used to. And technology is such a huge part of that, right? Because if we can't teach our students in the same room with us and look into their faces and have them come to our office and ask us questions and talk to them in the hallways, which has for many of us been a big part of how we do this work of learning and teaching, then suddenly technology is a bigger, more delicate, more blunt, more new instrument than it has ever been before. And there are on our campus, and I'm sure on all your campuses, folks who are really talented and hardworking and know so much more about this that we are all going to be leaning on, right, to bring technology meaningfully into our pedagogy. As was very evident with the list of questions you brought with you today, care has always been there, and it is there right now, right? And today our focus is on care. So I just want to say that how we design a class, how we teach that class, how we invite our students into that experience, and how they learn, that is all part of pedagogy, but that is also how we show we care for them. And technology is going to be a bigger tool perhaps than it has before. But when you start to think of technology and issues of access, whether students have access to technology, what is thinking of issues like Zoom fatigue, thinking of how someone in a different country might be able to access an internet resource, right? These are tiny examples, and there are many more. But this is an example of how caring is also a component of how technology is used as an instrument for us. So these are the interlocking circles. And these things are looming large for us, not only because our students and we are in these global crises, it's because we are also in this other crisis of our practices shifting so dramatically, right? So we have to redefine and reimagine how we teach and learn. This is also an urgent context. Couple things that I want to point out here. Many of you may already have come upon this advice guide that the Chronicle shared from Flower Darby, who is also the author of Small Teaching Online, which is a companion volume to James Lang's Small Teaching. It's a super practical guide. So I'm just going to point you to this handy resource with lots and lots of tactical advice. But for the purposes of our work together today, I just want to point out to you that the three first and key pieces of advice that she shares in this guide called How to Be a Better Online Teacher is show up, be yourself, I might add bring yourself, and put yourself in their shoes. So these are big, these are affective, these are also small, tactical, and precise, and they directly point to the heart of our project, empathy and care. Kathy Davidson of the Humanities, Arts, Sciences, and Technology Alliance and Collaboratory, hashtag which to me always sounds like hashtag, from CUNY, has written a blog post that has gone viral, as many things have in these recent discussions around pedagogy. But this one has stuck with me. And it's titled "The Single Most Essential Requirement is Designing a Fall Online Course." And in this piece, Kathy Davidson centers course design around this acknowledgement of context, awareness of pain, dislocation, uncertainty, trauma that is now central to all our lives. And this was written as a response to the pandemic, right? But as I'm sure connections are happening in all of our brains, this is not just about the pandemic. It is about acknowledging trauma, which can come from the pandemic, can come from structures and systems of societal injustice and racial violence. It can be something we have recognized. Some of it can be something we've recognized since January, and others, the trauma that has been with us all along. But in this urgent context, Davidson says, we need to be human first and professor second. And perhaps that is something that we can hold on to. So how does trauma play out in our individual learning abilities and practices? And how can we be human first and professor second, right? I mean, this sounds like a very, very big piece. Someone asked a question, one of you asked a question, how can I not make this 40 independent studies in a class? And how can I have a class, right? And that's a really important question. And at the same time, it is, any class is 40 independent studies, right? And I mean, it always is, because for that student, they are an N of one learning and learning with you in that experience. And so there are practices which may become even more important remotely, to say, you know, we're going to try to set aside perhaps some class time to have individual meetings with all students as much as possible in the first couple weeks of class. Or some weeks before the course begins, we might send out a survey with open-ended, respectful questions that help us understand a little more of the context that of the specific students for whom we are designing this class. In our small liberal arts colleges, where relationship is so important as a component of how we you know, teach and learn together, those might be things that we can do to bring the larger experience of our students into the relationship of teaching and learning that we're building with them. Something that has helped me think about trauma in particular is the work of Jacob Ham, who is at the Center for Child Trauma and Resilience at Mount Sinai in New York. And he talks about the survival brain and the learning brain. And the learning brain, these are some of the qualities he defines: curiosity, being open to new information, being okay with making mistakes, being comfortable with ambiguity, playful and fun, enjoy the bigger picture, to be calm, to be confident. As I was looking at this, I realized that these are assumptions that I make about students who come into a shared community of learning and teaching with me in my courses. And I cannot necessarily make these assumptions, because for the urgent context we have now and the urgent contexts and pandemics we've always had with us, students may be even survival brain mode. They may be hyper-focused on threat. They might not be comfortable with ambiguity. They might feel panic, be afraid of making mistakes, want things to be over before danger strikes. And evolutionarily, our survival brain surmounts our learning brain because survival, right? And so this has been something that has given me pause to say that perhaps some of us and some of our students are in survival mode all the time. because of all kinds of reasons, and more of us are in survival mode now because of this urgent context of the pandemic. And this trauma is already present in our classrooms. Jacob Him has an image of a little elephant kind of jumping up and having fun and exploring, and says, look, this elephant can explore because these giant mama elephants are standing around it. So this little elephant feels safe, right? So he intends this as an image for families and children with whom he works. But I think it kind of works for us too, right? And at the same time, being big mama elephant is a big job. And so, you know, I think an honesty with our own selves about where we are and what we can bring is really important, alongside this understanding that how we learn shifts and changes in these urgent contexts. Our needs might change in these urgent contexts. So I'll share with you now this funny picture. This is my dog, Maddie. It's a, you know, maybe it's making you smile. It's a reminder of how our non-human friends sustain us. It is a picture of Maddie reading a new book about Emily Dickinson. My wife took this picture for me to share with the author, who I happen to know. I love this picture, but Maddie's needs are not being met in this picture, even though she is the subject of this picture, right? We're not even considering Maddie's needs. And this is not to say that staged pet photos are forbidden from here on out, because that wouldn't fly in my household. But I find myself looking at this picture as a reminder of how any particular arrangement, class, be it a class, a course, or society, is bound to leave needs unmet, right? It's bound to leave all needs unmet. But if we keep an inventory of the most fundamental needs front of mind, then we're more likely to build a space where our students and we can feel more safe and therefore be more resilient. I share with you a list of needs from the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and they have a much more expanded version of this list on the website, which is referred to here. And I think, again, this list can be useful to us no matter how we teach, in person or online, and whether it's next fall or whether it's in 2030. I will share one last thought with you here before take a little break, which is from Arundhati Roy, her essay, Pandemic as Portal, which again, many of you might be familiar with, which suggests that the pandemic and any crisis may be a portal, an opportunity to break down unjust structures and move forward into a more just world. This essay has been a touchstone for me, but the story I want to share with you comes from Professor Farah Jasmine Griffin at Columbia, and what she and her students did during the emergency pivot to remote instruction last spring. And as you can see, she shares that her students emerged powerful and bright in this season of unimaginable death, especially Black and brown death. In a response to Arundhati Roy's call, she made an assignment for her African American literature class. And I won't read it out loud, you can see it on your screen. But this assignment to me is a beautiful and succinct handbook for course design and teaching with care and hope for us and for our students. What is essential? Why is it essential? What can we let go? What can we leave behind? What is the change we wish to see in them and in all of us, and how can we make that happen? Many of you had questions about content, and I think this is also a reminder to think about that content of all of the courses we teach. What are the essentials? So we will pause now for another couple moments of reflection. A lot of stuff has come to you. What has come up? What are you responding to? Just checking in.
So we don't know what each person brings into the classroom with us, just like we didn't know what each of you were bringing to this workshop. And it's quite beautiful to see the chat with everyone chiming in with all kinds of emotions, from indifference to fatigue to commitment, anger, hope, so many things. It's really cool to see the chat hold all of that for us. Devavani said we need to be aware of the trauma, of the grief that people are bringing, of the survival brain that we ourselves might be bringing into the profession, from the profession, I should say, from our profession, our academic profession. I don't know about you, but graduate school for me was a exercise in survival brain. So these situations are not just for our students, they are also our situations. And Devavani also brought up the language that we use, the language that is part of the way we communicate, the way we welcome others into our space. The premise of nonviolent communication is that we all seek honest and empathic connection, and that if we use life-affirming language, we are more likely to have our needs met. Radical hospitality. Well, first, let's see, on this slide, I'm making a horticultural pun here because the amelanchier tree is also called the service berry tree. But I don't want to talk so much about service. I want to talk about how we make a space together for teaching and learning. You know, just even saying our students' names, pronouncing them correctly, using the pronouns that they prefer, maybe even inviting them to share a name story because we all have one. I want to share with you a little story about Family Zoom Hour. How many of you have had Family Zoom Hours? You can raise your hands. And anyway, I can't really see you, but I know that you're having them because Family Zoom Hours have become the topic of late night comedy. So it can't just be my family. The Aguilar family just had our third one this weekend, involving 3 generations, ages 3 to 89, calling in from Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Calgary, in Canada, and Manila. Honestly, the first Zoom we had was so awkward. It was terrible because we didn't have a plan. No one knew what to say or do. And to fill the space, my favorite auntie just started showing off the tropical fruits on her breakfast plate. And it just quickly descended into something like family food porn. So the lesson, it is so important. Can you hear me? It is so important to have an agenda and a purpose. That's why we make, you know, a clear syllabus and clear assignments. Thankfully, this last weekend, our family Zoom went well because my tax brother lawyer came forward with a very clear set of instructions and simple discussion prompts tailored to each generation. Not surprisingly, it was a success, and now everybody is looking forward to the next phone call, a Zoom call. Radical hospitality. I could also call it active hospitality. I could call it critical hospitality. It's more than just opening the door and say, come into my Zoom hour. It's saying, I want to find a place where each of you can belong. I want to create a place where each of you can find a way to explore your own values, your own beliefs. That's what this classroom is for, this Zoom space. Ideally, when we ask people to attend our workshops or students to come to class, we're not just asking them to attend. Devavani used the word be yourself, bring yourself. we want them to bring themselves, and they will do that if we also bring ourselves into the situation. So much of this is what we do and what we signal through our words, through our preparation, through our actual nonverbal body language. And there's just a little quote here from Priya Parker. You can see her delightful TED Talk about gathering. She comes from family, her parents are divorced. They have very, very different beliefs, background, structures. She ended up being really a very good conflict mediator, and she brings people together. That's her specialty. Whether it's over a Thanksgiving meal, a birthday party, a wedding, her idea is that gathering matters because it is through each other that we figure out what we believe. In the next slide, I want to talk about an embodied practice, teaching as an embodied practice. So of course here I'm making a gesture, an homage to my colleague, our colleague, Becky Thompson at Simmons College. Her book, Teaching with Tenderness Towards an Embodied Practice. Let's see if you can see that here. Really a must read. I had it on my shelf for a while, but I was too scared to open it. And I opened it last year, I think, when our colleague Crystal Moten mentioned the book in a workshop and how she drew so much from it. So that gave me the courage to open the book. But I will say that I'm here today mostly because of my very embarrassing mistakes. And I want to share one of them because I think hopefully, well, one, you'll exonerate me, but also that you'll relate to this. It's the story of the day after the 2016 presidential election, November 10th, 2016, the morning after. I was teaching a first year course that met at 9:40 a.m. So it's the first thing that I do in the morning on campus. For that segment, for that on the syllabus and that time slot, I had planned a segment on Obama's legacy. So we were reading and talking about President Obama and the pressures on him to be Black, but not speak from a Black place, and to not scare anyone with what could be a Black agenda. So in a way, he was between a rock and a hard place, according to this author. I had not planned what to do if Trump won. Also, I did not check in with my spouse before I left the house that morning. A very, very bad mistake, because my spouse is the one in the household who naturally emotes, who operates from a feeling base, and who is preternaturally empathic. So having no plan and being not checked in with myself, I went to campus. And I entered the classroom, and I purposely left no space for the students to veer off of my plan. Isn't that what a syllabus is for? I started class and I said, okay, so let's continue our discussion of Obama, chapter 6, or whatever it was. Why does Michael Eric Dyson look at Obama's time this way? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the students, dutifully did it. The college students practically do almost anything we ask. They did it. But the last 5 minutes, they couldn't stand it anymore. And I remember I was standing in the doorway, just kind of moving around, standing in the doorway, and they turned to me and they said, "Why aren't you talking about the election? We need to talk about this." And I was so taken aback. I'm not ready to talk about this. Why should I open this up for you to talk about this? I have no idea. I have no support. I haven't been able to talk to anyone anyone at all over the age of 21 about this. Not that that really matters, but that was my thinking. And who knows what other excuses I came up with that I would be very embarrassed to enumerate to you right now. I will say that within the few hours of the day, I kind of recovered a little bit. And the postdoc in our department asked me, "Oh, what's the mood on campus like?" And I said, "It's like a funeral." And she said, "Oh, okay. I think I know what to do in my evening class." And I said, "Oh, what will you do?" And she said, "I think I'll ask them to write a letter to themselves that they'll open in 4 years." And I was like, "Yeah, you should totally do that." So I could say I didn't come up with my own idea, but at least I knew within a few hours to support the idea of someone who had more sense and more common sense in that moment. And I will also say that 4 of those students from the first year class became American Studies majors and graduated this May. And thankfully, I have been able to reprocess that moment with them since it was their first experience voting. And it was such a letdown for them. So what I didn't really understand then, what I didn't really understand then is that I have the internal resources to handle the situation. I have my intellect, that's the one that got me into graduate school and got me this job, but I also have emotions, and I have my body with my felt sensations and perceptions. And that's all information that I can work with and don't need to be afraid of. Knowing that those internal resources are always present for us, my answer to the question, how are we going to be with grief, trauma, and uncertainty? Well, it comes first with a whole set of excuses about why I should flee from that question. You know, my head full of brains, shoes full of feet. In my head full of brains, I had a whole menu of reasons about why I don't need to deal with this question. And sometimes I still think about them. The first is that it's a challenge. It's not part of my job. We have therapists on campus, so I'll be way out of my league, and probably I'm doing malpractice even by trying to handle feelings that I'm not good with. It's too much work. I might do something wrong. It's emotional labor, and emotional labor that is not paid or recognized. Worse than that, it's gendered. So as a woman of color, as a lesbian, I'm already doing this. It's already my job in a way. So now I'm somehow resisting it because of that. Maybe I'm also saying, well, it's not so productive because, I'm going to spend all this time on feelings and not so much time on Michael Eric Dyson's arguments. Maybe I'm also resenting that I know my colleagues who have the privilege to remain disembodied in a kind of state of whiteness, a disembodied state. Maybe they don't know it's a privilege and they don't feel it as a privilege, but there are privileges associated with that. And maybe also in that kind of spaces of our college that are, that kind of maybe don't always recognize or unconsciously operate in a context of upper class, white performance, white performativity. So that means not looking at feelings, not going there because that's disturbing the agenda. It's not on the agenda, so we can't deal with it, which is exactly what I did with my first years. Being the teacher lets us be human beings and lets us bring the human being back into the classroom. It's a different way of being maybe for some of us, but I assure you that in this space of, I don't want to say resilience, what I meant was receptive space, there's more space for me. And I think that Devavani and I share the experience of also having bodily practices. Devavani is a certified yoga instructor. I'm a longtime martial arts practitioner. I've brought a Devavani to my classes to do yoga. I've also brought people and done Tai Chi and meditation with students, just as a way to remind us that our bodies are here and that they are helping us be with each other. So let me invite you now to another riparian reflection moment. I see that there are some chats you're sharing. That's so lovely. Already the desire to support and instruct each other. Okay, everyone. We would really love for you to now meet someone. Hopefully Zoom will do this nicely. It's random, and somebody needs to tell me how Zoom really knows how random that is. Anyway, we're gonna have breakout groups, hopefully of 5 people. I think Brian's gonna do the magic of that. To set the tone here, we want to offer a chance to meet and reflect with others, especially maybe people you don't already know. We want to offer a space to listen, share, and practice with care and hope, and also to acknowledge the difficulties and inequities that we are facing. A suggestion for when you're in your group, would you please introduce yourselves, your names and your PGPs, and invite everyone in. Notice the time and space that is taken. And the prompts, if you need them, there's 3 questions here, so I'm sure you know what to do, but that gives you something to start with. So I think we'll go into the groups now, and I believe we'll show up in some group also. So yeah, many things to talk about. Maybe Devani will also say just a parting message. We have many people to thank. Yeah, we are glad that this experiment worked in terms of doing a Zoom session with 4,000 people that we don't know, and that you were able to get a little rest in the meantime. So we're so happy to see you. You bring so much to our campuses. Your thought and care for yourself and others is so important in keeping this world a good place for all of us. We'll see each other on Friday, and we'll have disciplinary conversations. So between then and now, I hope you're well. I hope you have other people to talk with, and we'll see you on Friday. I don't know if Devani wants to say something also.
Devani?
Or perhaps she got kicked out.
There we go.
Okay.
I thank you, Karin. I want to say thank you to you for being, as always, a fabulous co-conspirator and co-creator, and challenging and inspiring me always. So thank you for that. Thanks to Brian and Charlie and ACM for making this possible. Thanks to all of you for showing up and being in the space. I know that you already had a poem read to you today, but Karin and I read poems a lot. So we'll see you on Friday, and I'll sign off with just a few lines that I have been coming back to over and over since our worlds, paused in March. And it's from Go to the Limits of Your Longing by Rainer Maria Rilke. It's a translation by Joanna Macy. And it's just the last few lines of that poem that I wanted to share with you. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. Thank you, everyone.